The CEO dressed as a janitor again, but this time, the new waitress knew he was hurting. Every night, after the last customer paid their bill and the lights along Main Street dimmed to a soft amber glow, a man in a gray work uniform came through the back door of Hale's diner and began to mop the floors. He wore thick rubber gloves, kept his head down, and rarely said more than a few words to anyone. Most of the staff figured he was just part of the cleaning crew, the quiet fellow who showed up after closing and left before the sun came up. Nobody asked his last name. Nobody thought to. Emma Sutton had been working at Hale's for about 3 weeks when she first noticed him. She was 24, new to town, still finding her footing after moving from a smaller place 2 counties over. Waitressing wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and there was something comforting about the diner itself, the hum of the coffee machines, the smell of fried onions, the older regulars who came in every evening like clockwork. It reminded her of home. The janitor, whose name tag simply read, Adrian, kept to himself. He'd nod at her when their paths crossed near the kitchen, maybe offer a quiet evening, as he wheeled his cart past the booths. There was something in the way he carried himself, though, that caught Emma's attention. He moved like a man much older than he looked, like his shoulders were carrying something heavier than a mop bucket. One evening, after the dinner rush had died down and most of the tables were empty, Emma was setting up for the morning shift when she saw him kneeling near the back booth, not cleaning, just still. His head was bowed, and for a moment, she thought he might be praying. Then she saw his shoulders shake, just slightly, just once, and she understood. She didn't say anything. She simply walked over, set a cup of coffee down near him on the floor, and went back to her side of the room. When she glanced back a few minutes later, the coffee was gone, and so was he, off in the back somewhere, gathering himself. That was how it started. Small kindnesses, offered without explanation. Over the following weeks, Emma made a habit of leaving him things, a slice of pie that hadn't sold, a cup of coffee made just the way she noticed he liked it, black with a little too much sugar. She never made a big show of it. She'd simply set it where he'd find it and let him be. Adrian began to notice her noticing him, and something between them started to shift, slow and careful, like 2 people testing the ice on a pond before deciding it could hold their weight. One night, Emma saw him hang his jacket on the hook by the lockers, the same as always. What she didn't know was that folded neatly in the breast pocket was a $20 bill, tucked away by his own hand, meant for nothing in particular, just habit from years back when a spare bill in your pocket meant the difference between a good week and a hard one. Emma, thinking he might be struggling, quietly placed her own folded 20 on the table near his gloves before her shift ended. She didn't leave a note. She just wanted him to have it, in case he needed it more than she did. What she couldn't have known was that Adrian Hale owned the diner. He owned 6 of them, scattered across the state, along with a company that employed nearly 400 people. By day, he sat at the head of a long glass table in a downtown office tower, listening to quarterly reports and shaking hands with investors who called him, sir, and hung on his every word. By night, he came here, to the first restaurant he'd ever opened, and he mopped the floors himself, because it was the only place left in his life that still felt like his. His wife, Caroline, had helped him open this very diner nearly 15 years ago. They'd painted the booths together, hung the photographs on the walls, and built something out of nothing with their own 2 hands. When she passed 2 years back, after a long illness that took more from her than either of them ever let on to family or friends, Adrian found he couldn't sit still in the silence of his big house anymore. So he came here at night, when no one from his office life would recognize him, and he did the one thing that still made sense: he took care of the place she'd loved. Nobody at the company knew. Nobody at the diner knew, either, except maybe the old manager who'd worked there since the beginning and kept his secret out of loyalty and respect. Emma didn't know any of this, not yet. She only knew that the quiet janitor seemed like a man who was hurting, and something in her wouldn't let her look away from that. Their friendship deepened in small moments. He'd help her restock the napkin dispensers when her shift ran long. She'd sit with him during his break, sharing bits of her own life, her mother back home, her dream of maybe going back to school someday, her nervousness about being new in a town where everyone else seemed to know each other already. One evening, carrying a tray loaded with cups and a bundle of silverware, Emma's foot caught the edge of a chair leg, and the whole tray went tumbling. Spoons scattered across the floor in every direction, clattering loud enough that the whole diner turned to look. Her face went red, embarrassment burning in her chest as she stood frozen amid the mess, the diner falling into an awkward hush around her. Adrian was there before she even had time to kneel down. He crouched beside her without a word, gathering spoons 2 and 3 at a time, glancing up at her with a small, reassuring smile that said, more than any words could, that it was all right, that nobody was judging her, that these things happened to everybody sooner or later. Slowly, the diner went back to its usual chatter, and Emma felt her shoulders loosen. It was such a small thing, him kneeling there beside her, but it meant more to her than he probably realized. It was a few nights after that when everything came apart, and then, in its own way, came back together. Emma had stayed late, helping close up, when she noticed Adrian standing near the back door, his jacket half on, staring out at the rain that had started falling sometime during the dinner rush. Something about the way he stood there, so still, so far away in his own thoughts, worried her. She followed him out into the alley behind the diner, the rain soaking through her dress almost instantly. "You don't have to pretend with me," she said, her voice steady despite the cold. "I've seen you crying back there. More than once." He turned to face her, rain running down his face, mixing with something else he wasn't bothering to hide anymore. "It's not something I talk about," he said quietly. "You don't have to talk about it," Emma said. "You just don't have to carry it alone every single night." He took one step closer, close enough that she could see just how tired he truly was, how long he'd been holding himself together with nothing but stubbornness and routine. And then it came out, slowly at first, then all at once: Caroline, the diner, the company, the years of grief he'd folded up small enough to carry in his back pocket so nobody else would have to see the weight of it. Emma didn't say much. She didn't need to. She simply stood there with him in the rain, letting him say what he'd needed to say for a very long time, and for the first time in 2 years, Adrian Hale didn't feel quite so alone. The days that followed brought a different kind of quiet between them, an understanding rather than a distance. Emma learned the truth about who he was, not the CEO part, though that surprised her plenty, but the deeper truth, the man underneath all that, still grieving, still trying to find his footing in a life that had shifted beneath him without warning. Then, one evening a few weeks later, Adrian didn't show up for his usual shift. Emma found him collapsed near his car in the back lot, pale and struggling to catch his breath, the stress of years finally catching up to a body that had been running on empty for far too long. She got him to the hospital herself, staying by his side through the waiting and the worry, through doctors coming and going with clipboards and quiet reassurances. They sat together in the emergency room, exhaustion settling over both of them, and somewhere in the stillness of those blue plastic chairs, their hands found each other. Adrian's fingers were rough from years of work, hers steady despite the fear she'd been carrying since she found him on the pavement. Neither of them said much. They didn't have to. Emma finally let herself hold on, resting her head against his shoulder as the hours passed, and Adrian, for the first time since Caroline had gone, let himself be held onto in return. It wasn't a grand ending, not the kind you'd see in a movie. It was quieter than that, and truer, too. Two people who'd found each other in the most ordinary of places, brought together not by wealth or circumstance, but by the simple, powerful act of one person noticing another person's pain and refusing to look away. Sometimes that's all it takes. A cup of coffee left in the right place. A hand that reaches for yours in a waiting room. Someone who sees you, really sees you, when you thought nobody was looking at all. If this story touched your heart today, I'd love for you to give it a like, share it with someone who might need a little reminder that kindness still matters, and subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories like this one. And if you've got a moment, drop a comment and let me know what part stayed with you most. Thank you for spending this time with me.